Hello everyone. In this video, we'll walk through how to configure single sign-on using Okta for the HPE GreenLake platform. We'll cover the full setup process, that is, creating the SAML application in Okta, claiming and verifying a domain in GreenLake, configuring the SSO connection, creating an authentication policy, adding users and granting them access. By the end of this walkthrough, users will be able to log into the GreenLake platform using their Okta credentials through SSO. So let's begin. First, log into the GreenLake platform and navigate to Manage Workspace. Before configuring SSO, we need to make sure that organization features are enabled. If this workspace was recently created, you may see an option to enable organization features. When prompted, select Create Organization. This step is required because SSO configuration is managed at the organization level. Once enabled, you'll see the Domains and SSO configuration sections. Our first step is to claim a domain. Claiming a domain verifies that your organization owns a specific email domain. This is important because it allows the platform to automatically route users from that domain to the correct identity provider, such as Okta in this case. To claim a domain, enter the domain name, then copy the text record generated by the platform. Add this text record to your organization's DNS configuration. Once the DNS entry is added, the platform will verify ownership of the domain. Depending on your DNS provider, this can take some time, occasionally up to 72 hours. Once verification completes, the domain status changes to verified. For this demo, we'll use a domain that has already been verified. One quick tip. If you are claiming a subdomain, make sure the text record is added to the DNS configuration for that specific subdomain. Now that the domain has been verified, we can configure the SSO connection. An SSO connection defines the trust relationship between GreenLake and the identity provider, Okta in this case. Navigate to Manage Workspace, then SSO Configuration, and open the SSO Connections tab. Click the Create SSO Connection to begin. Provide a name for the connection and select SAML 2.0 as the authentication protocol. SAML is the standard used to securely exchange authentication information between the identity provider and the platform. As you proceed through the wizard, you'll see several SAML configuration values. These include items such as destination URL, entity ID, and various other attributes needed to complete the configurations. Make a note of these values. We'll need them shortly when configuring the Okta application. For the metadata step, choose Specify Metadata URL. We'll return here after retrieving the metadata from Okta. For now, leave the wizard open and switch to Okta. Next, log into the Okta Administrator console. Navigate to Applications and select Create Application. Choose SAML 2.0 as the sign-on method. This application represents the GreenLake platform within Okta. Give the application a meaningful name and proceed to the next step. On the SAML configuration page, enter the values we copied earlier from the GreenLake SSO wizard. Once the required URLs and the name ID format are configured, click Next and save the application. For this basic setup, the remaining optional fields can remain at their default values. These settings can always be customized later if needed. At this point, the core SAML configuration is complete. Next, open the Sign-On tab for the application. Scroll down to Attribute Statements and select Show Legacy Configuration. Here, we add the attributes required by the GreenLake platform. These attributes allow Okta to pass user identity and authorization information during login. Pay close attention to attribute names and casing, as these values are case sensitive. For this configuration, we will add 4 attributes. These can be modified later depending on how your organization manages identity attributes. The final step on the Okta side is to retrieve the metadata URL. You can find this at the top of the sign-on page. Copy the metadata URL. This metadata contains important configuration details about the identity provider, including certificates and authentication endpoints. We will now return to the GreenLake platform and complete the SSO connection setup. Back in GreenLake, paste the metadata URL in the SSO connection wizard and validate it. If the configuration is correct, the platform will automatically populate the required SAML fields. Once the connection is created, the next step is to configure an authentication policy. Authentication policies define how users from a domain authenticate when accessing the platform. Create a new policy and select the verified domain. Then select the SSO connection we just created. For authorization mode, you can choose either local role assignments where roles are managed in GreenLake or SSO role assignments where roles are provided by the identity provider. For this example, we'll use SSO role assignments. After reviewing the configuration, click Create Authentication Policy. Next, we need to add a required attribute in Okta. Navigate to Directory and then Profile Editor. Open the Okta user profile schema and create a new attribute called HPE_CCS_attribute, all lowercase. This attribute carries authorization information used by the platform to determine workspace access, user roles, and permission scope. Set the attribute to required. Grant read-write access and save the schema. Now we can add a user. Navigate to Directory and People and click Add Person. Add the user's name and email address. The email domain should match the domain we verified earlier. Next, populate the HPE_CCS_attribute field. This value includes several elements such as the workspace identifier, platform identifier, and the user's assigned role. For this demo, we'll grant the user full scope access. If you would like to learn more about how this attribute is structured, refer to the documentation link shown on the screen. This guide explains how to construct the attribute value and configure roles and permissions. The final step in Okta is to assign the application to the user. Open the user profile and select Assign Applications. Choose the GreenLake application we created earlier. Once assigned, the user is authorized to authenticate through Okta. Now we can test the login process. The user navigates to the GreenLake login page and signs in using their organization email. Because the domain is verified, the platform automatically redirects the user to Okta for authentication. After successful authentication, the user is redirected back to the GreenLake workspace with the appropriate roles and permissions. That concludes our walkthrough on configuring single sign-on using Okta for the GreenLake platform. Thank you for watching.